Hello, this is Dr. Michael Myers, Associate Professor of Health Sciences at National University. In this short video presentation, I'm going to show you how to do a two-sample t-test in StatCrunch. An example that I often use in my class is a small data set where we have two groups to look at. This is a pilot study evaluating the use of a new drug on the ability to increase cognitive function based on a 60-point scale in patients with Alzheimer's disease compared to a regimen of behavioral therapy. So we've sorted our patients into two groups, those that got the behavioral therapy and those that took the medication. Our question here is, how can we run a two-sample t-test on this data to get an answer to see if there's a significant difference between the groups? Well, I'm going to go ahead and load that data into StatCrunch. I can go ahead and enter that data, which I've already done here. You can pause the recording and enter this into your spreadsheet as well. Now notice what I've done is I've entered the scores just as we have in the rest of these video series. In StatCrunch, I've given each row has become a subject or a patient in our study. I could have entered the data as you see here and put them into two different columns, but I want to be consistent in how we treat data, just like we did in the first part of this video series, where we looked at this data set where we had poverty and work status and mental health scores. We've done the same thing. In our data set, we've loaded each subject or each patient as a row in our StatCrunch table. This is often how data is analyzed and stored. Going back to our sample, here we have our two groups. So here's our independent variable, the therapy that the people got. Either 6 people got behavioral therapy and 6 people got the medication therapy. And here are their functional scores in the second column. Now to do the two-sample t-test in StatCrunch, we're first going to have to tell the software what to do. The first thing we want to do is split the data. To do that, we'll just go to the Data tab and down to Arrange and Split. This is so we can do our analyses on both groups. So the column I'm going to select is going to be the function score, and I'm going to split it by the independent variable, which is the therapy. I could put that in a new table, or I could just click Compute and it'll put it in this table for us. So very quickly, StatCrunch created and split our data. Now we have our two groups just like we see on the PowerPoint slide that we can now analyze in StatCrunch. To do a two-sample t-test in StatCrunch, you just need to click on the Stat tab, T-Stats, and now we click on two-sample with data because we have the data in our table. Sample 1, we're going to click on the behavioral functional score. So these are the scores of the people in the behavioral therapy group. Sample 2 is going to be those that got the medication. Here, since we have equal numbers in our group, we're going to leave that pool variances clicked. So by default, that's already clicked. Again, this is the pool variance formula. So we have an independent t-test here. These groups are independent. There are 12 separate patients that are either in the behavioral group or the medication group. Here we're not retesting the same subjects, which would be a dependent type of test. In the middle of the dialog box, you'll see we can perform our hypothesis test. Now here we have the test already set up for us, unlike at the one-sample test. Our null hypothesis, if nothing is going on, the difference between the two means of our groups should be 0. Another way of saying this is that the means of the two groups are equal, so the difference should be 0. The alternative hypothesis is that they are not. Again, we just go ahead and click Compute, and the software will do the two-sample t-test for us. The software brings back our hypotheses. So here's the mean of group 1 and group 2, and the difference between the two means should be 0. Here's our degrees of freedom. In this case, it's 10 because we have 12 subjects in our group. For a two-sample t-test, it's n-2, so the degrees of freedom are 10. Here's our test statistic, 1.938 or 1.94 if we round it off, a p-value of 0.08 reflecting a non-significant result because our p-value is above 0.05. It's at about 8%. So again, the p-value is the probability of seeing this value of test statistic or higher in our test. We can also look at this test statistic and compare it to the critical value. So if we bring over our t-table and we go down to 10 degrees of freedom, we see that at this level, 0.05 level of significance, the critical value is 2.23. So here our test statistic 1.94 is not greater than the critical value, again telling us that we have a non-significant result. We can then copy and paste this result into our assignment or project, and we're finished. Again, this is a simple, short example of how we can perform a two-sample t-test in StatCrunch.